For the Macintosh's 40th birthday, I dug out my original Mac and some floppy disks. And what I found had been lost to time for 40 years. Holy sh! Hello there, I'm Steve from Mac84, and not long ago, I got my hands on a very unique prototype Macintosh computer that was owned by Rick Ross, who was a very early developer for Macintosh applications. Rick's wife Beth had reached out to me to try and assess the value of this machine. I did a whole video about this process, and I'll link to it in the video description and put a card in the corner. I helped them sell this Macintosh prototype, and in return I got a bunch of boxes full of cables, random goodies, and a ton of floppy disks to sort through. Now, I'm no stranger to archiving books and old disks and stuff like that, but the amount of stuff they gave me was going to be a challenge to go through. Nonetheless, over a few live streams, I sorted through a majority of these disks. Some of them contained very interesting things, such as pre-release versions of the Macintosh operating system, different versions of the Mac Calc software that Rick developed, and some goodies including some pieces of Macintosh software that were thought lost to time. To celebrate the 40th anniversary of this Macintosh, I decided to plug it in and use some of these original system disks to start it up. So let's take a trip back in time and boot up like it's 1984. The original Macintosh had a 400 kilobyte single-sided floppy disk drive and no internal hard drive. It originally came with version 1.0 of the Macintosh system software, and my goal was to use this original version. However, that was easier said than done, as version 1.1 was released only a few months after the Macintosh's debut, so it's more common to find these later disks. But I had a stack of original floppies and I was feeling lucky. To my surprise, most of these disks booted up without a problem, although some were erased and used for other things. But it seemed like none of them was exactly what I was looking for. This one was version 1.1, which was too new. This version was too early, but it was close, except somebody had changed the default system font. I then came across a Tor disk. This was also included with the Mac and worked in conjunction with the included audio cassette and product manual. The combination of these materials worked in unison to quickly show you the basics of how to use the Macintosh computer. While it was fun to explore how people learned how to use this computer 40 years ago, I was still looking for an earlier version of the software. Lastly, this disk was marked Mac Write, Mac Paint, a combination of both productivity applications offered by Apple. I put the disk in to demo how multitasking worked on the original Mac. Because of memory constraints, you couldn't load two applications at the same time. However, a creative workaround allowed you to launch handy desk accessories while you had another application open. Desk accessories were sort of mini applications that you could launch from the Apple menu. These were often single-function applications like a calculator, a notepad, or an alarm clock, but they were essential in letting you multitask with your Macintosh. I was so focused on demoing the functionality of this Mac that it took me a second to realize the contents of the document that was just open. This was too intricate to simply be an included sample document, but what exactly was I looking at here? Wait a second. Holy shit! This was a document written by the one and only Joanna Hoffman, an original member of the Macintosh team at Apple. Joanna was lured to Apple by Jeff Raskin. She started on the Macintosh project in October of 1980. The excellent book, Revolution in the Valley, notes that the Mac was still considered a research project at this time. Joanna would end up writing the first draft of the Macintosh User Interface Guidelines and later led the international marketing team for the Macintosh. She was instrumental in giving the Mac a worldwide audience. So what were Joanna's letters doing on this disk? And how did they get there? And how did I get this disk? Well, it all starts with Rick Ross. If you remember, he had that prototype Macintosh computer, and he recalls that Joanna gave him that machine. So it's only likely that she gave him some disks to go along with it, and those disks ended up in a box in my basement. And of course, Rick used those disks as well. In fact, it's a miracle that Joanna's files weren't overwritten, because Rick had some files on that same disk. These unique letters from Joanna appear to be from early 1984 to mid-1984. They give a unique look inside Apple at a critical point in the company's history. In one document dated February 12, 1984, Joanna discusses the pricing of not yet localized Macintosh systems for the Japanese market. She goes on to compare the Macintosh to a few other mouse-driven computers of the time. She touts that the Macintosh is in a league of its own, but warns the team of setting the price at too high of a premium. In another letter from April 30th, 1984, Joanna presents a detailed progress report for the Macintosh. This covers such topics as getting a 220-volt European-compatible Mac ready by May, the positive results from Steve Jobs' recent European press tour, and how the Apple Lisa has good demand internationally, and that a Lisa 210 build is being completed currently for the European market. In another letter, dated February 1984, Joanna discusses the average selling price of the Mac and the Lisa in Australia and Latin America. And then we have a very detailed and personal look into Joanna's life at Apple. On June 16, 1984, Joanna wrote a mid-year review about her goals at Apple. This was written to Barbara, who I assume was Barbara Colkin, who at some point served as the product marketing manager for the Macintosh. She was likely Joanna's manager at the time. This detailed document lists her many accomplishments, a few shortcomings, and a lengthy list of future goals. It's clear from this document and others that releasing the Macintosh and the Lisa on an international scale involved a ton of work. You know what's also a ton of work? Converting these original MacWrite text files from 1984 to open in anything fairly modern. After a lot of trial and error, I was able to import them into Microsoft Word 3.0 from 1992, and save them as a Word file which I could then open with Microsoft Word from 2004. Finally, I was able to save that into a fairly modern Word format. All of these conversions did mess up the formatting of the documents a bit, but they are a bit easier to read on my big screen than on a small 9-inch black and white monitor. Oh, and about my search for System 1.0? Well, it turns out Joanna's disk had that too. As for Joanna, she left Apple in 1985 and followed Steve Jobs to Next. Afterwards, she became Vice President of Marketing at General Magic, a company full of former Apple legends that created some pretty cool handheld devices. Joanna ended up retiring in 1995 to spend more time with her family. Oh. Oops. Thankfully, this floppy disk was in very good shape, and I was able to fully archive it. I'll include a link below to some converted PDF versions of these letters if you'd like to take a look at them. I'll also try and get a copy of these letters to Joanna. Hopefully she'll get a kick out of them. So that just goes to show you, you never know what you're going to find on a stack of old floppy disks. Before you consider tossing some old vintage media, please consider donating them to a member of the retro computing community. They'll be sure to make some good use out of them. Well, Macintosh, it's hard to believe it's been 40 years. Here's hoping that your insanely great spirit carries on for another 40 years, and then some. I've been Steve from Mac84. Please consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll catch you right here next time on Mac84.